It's the evening of May the 6th, 1937, and the largest object ever to fly is circling in the rain above a field in New Jersey. Thunderstorms have kept her waiting for hours. On the ground at Lakehurst Naval Air Station, a crowd looks up, newsreel cameras running, as the silver shape of the Hindenburg finally turns toward her mooring mast. She is more than 800 feet long. She has just crossed the Atlantic in half the time of the fastest ocean liner, and in a little over half a minute she will be gone. For almost 90 years, we've called this the moment the airship died. But the machine coming down over Lakehurst was one of the most advanced flying machines ever built by anyone. So which was she, really? A disaster written into the blueprints? Or an engineering triumph undone by a single decision that no engineer ever got to make? To understand what fell out of the sky that night, you have to go back to what she was built to be. The Hindenburg was never meant to be a spectacle. She was meant to be the future of travel. In the 1930s, if you wanted to cross the ocean, you took a ship and you gave up the better part of a week. The Hindenburg could carry you from Frankfurt to the coast of America in around 2.5 days, floating high above the weather. She flew without the roar of engines or the shudder of a ship's hull. Passengers dined in an elegant dining room, listened to a specially built lightweight aluminium piano in the lounge, and watched the ocean slide past through great slanted promenade windows. You could slide one of those windows open in flight and feel the cold Atlantic air on your face, hundreds of feet above the waves in near silence. This was the most graceful way a human being had ever traveled, and it worked. But every part of that experience rested on a single assumption, and that assumption is the whole story. When the engineers at the Zeppelin company sat down to design her, they designed her around helium. Helium is the safe gas. It lifts almost as well as hydrogen and it cannot burn. A ship built to fly on helium can be a floating hotel because the thing holding it up is completely inert. That was the plan from the very beginning. The Hindenburg was drawn up as a helium ship. There was only one problem. Almost all the helium on Earth was in America. In the 1920s, the United States realized it was sitting on nearly the entire world's supply of helium, locked inside its natural gas fields. And in 1927, Congress passed the Helium Control Act, which declared the gas a strategic resource and banned its export to any foreign nation. That law came 6 years before the Nazis took power. It had nothing to do with Hitler and everything to do with American strategic interest. But its effect on the Hindenburg was total. The head of the Zeppelin company, Hugo Eckener, traveled to Washington to plead for helium, and at one point he even won a promise of it. But the gas was rare. It cost 6 to 10 times more than hydrogen, and Germany had neither the money nor the equipment to store it. So the ship that had been designed for the gas that couldn't burn was filled instead with the gas that could. 7 million cubic feet of hydrogen. Everything after this point is the story of brilliant engineers trying to manage a danger they never chose. And they were brilliant. Underneath that silver skin was a skeleton of duralumin, a lightweight aluminium alloy, formed into a lattice of rings and girders that was astonishingly strong for its weight. She was fatter than the Zeppelins before her, and that shape wasn't vanity. The wider hull held nearly twice the gas of the older Graf Zeppelin, and it made her stronger against the bending forces of the open sky. 16 enormous gas cells, stitched from cotton and brushed with latex, filled her belly with lift, and she was pushed along by 4 Daimler-Benz diesel engines. That choice of diesel was deliberate, because diesel fuel is far harder to set alight than petrol. On a ship already carrying hydrogen, her engineers quietly took every gram of unnecessary risk off the table that they could, and she lifted so well that those 16 gas cells could raise close to double her own fully loaded weight. That margin is what let her carry passengers, private cabins, a kitchen, and days of fuel clean across an ocean. She could even fly herself for long stretches, held on course and altitude by a gyroscopic autopilot that was decades ahead of almost anything else in the sky, and she was vast enough to walk through. Deep inside that skeleton ran a network of catwalks, and the crew, and even a few curious passengers, could move along them between the towering gas cells dwarfed by the machine that was holding them all in the air. Werner Doehner, a boy we'll meet again in a few minutes, remembered touring those catwalks on the crossing. And that matters, because the Hindenburg is often remembered as reckless. She was the opposite. She was one of the most safety-obsessed machines of her entire era. Look closely and the whole ship is an argument with its own fuel. The outer cover was painted with aluminium powder, partly to reflect the sunlight and keep the hydrogen inside from warming up and expanding. No passenger was allowed to carry a match or a lighter aboard. Not one. And yet the Hindenburg still had a smoking room, because these were paying passengers on a luxury liner, and they expected a cigarette after dinner. So the engineers built a single pressurized smoking lounge, sealed behind a double-door airlock and kept at slightly higher pressure so that no hydrogen could ever drift inside. There was one electric lighter bolted to the wall, and a steward at the door making sure nobody ever left with anything still burning. A room for fire on a ship full of hydrogen, made safe by engineering. That was the mindset that built her, and for a long time that mindset worked. By 1937, commercial Zeppelins had been carrying passengers for more than 30 years. Tens of thousands of people had flown well over 1 million miles across the world's oceans, on more than 2,000 flights, on hydrogen, without a single passenger injury. The Hindenburg's own near sister, the Graf Zeppelin, had flown more than 1 million miles, crossed the Atlantic on a regular schedule, and even circled the entire planet in 1929, all on hydrogen, without ever harming a single passenger. These weren't daredevils gambling with people's lives. They were the most experienced airship crews on Earth, running the safest long-distance travel record of the age. To the men who built and flew these ships, hydrogen was simply a known danger, one they had spent decades learning to manage and to beat every single day. If you find yourself moved by machines like this, the ones with a name, an ambition, and a price, consider subscribing and staying with us for the next story. We try to tell these carefully because we think they deserve it. Now, let us go back to that field in New Jersey. By the evening of May the 6th, 1937, the Hindenburg had already crossed the Atlantic. She arrived over Lakehurst to find thunderstorms sitting on the airfield, and her captain, Max Pruss, did the responsible thing. He waited, circling for hours, even drifting his ship over Manhattan while the crowds below poured into the streets to look up, until the weather cleared enough to bring her down. But a storm leaves something behind in the air. The atmosphere over the field was still charged with static electricity, and as the ship maneuvered, she was slowly charging up along with it. The landing itself was a delicate piece of flying. The ground crew was not ready, so Pruss was forced to swing his ship away and come around again, and then the wind shifted on him at the last moment. To line up with it, he ordered a tight S-shaped turn toward the mooring mast. All the while the ship was running heavy in the tail, so his officers valved hydrogen from the forward gas cells, dropped more than a ton of water ballast from the stern, and sent 6 men hurrying up to the bow to bring her level. It was textbook airmanship. But somewhere inside that vast frame, under the strain of those sharp turns, a bracing wire is believed to have snapped, and its broken end tore into one of the rear gas cells. Hydrogen began leaking up into the space beneath the outer cover. On the ground, some of the crew saw the fabric near the tail begin to ripple, as though something underneath it were breathing. Moments later, the ship dropped her landing ropes, connecting her charged metal body to the wet earth below. In that instant, an electrical discharge, a spark, found the leaking gas. What followed took about 32 seconds. On the ground, a radio reporter named Herbert Morrison was calmly describing the landing when the words simply failed him, and his cry, "Oh, the humanity!" became the most famous 4 words in the history of broadcasting. There were 97 people aboard. 62 of them survived, many by leaping from the windows as the ship sank toward the ground. 35 did not, along with 1 man on the landing crew below, Alan Hageman. Among the passengers was the Doehner family on their way home to Mexico City. 8-year-old Werner Doehner watched his father step away from the dining room windows where he'd been filming the landing on a small movie camera only moments before the fire. His mother threw Werner and his brother clear of the wreck. His father, Herman, and his 14-year-old sister, Irene, did not survive. Werner lived to become the last survivor of the Hindenburg, and for most of his long life he could barely bring himself to speak of that night. These were never statistics, they were families, at the end of an ordinary journey home. So, design fail, or engineering genius? The honest answer is that she was both, and you can't pull the two apart. As a piece of engineering, the Hindenburg was a triumph. Her frame, her hull, her engines, her almost obsessive safety systems were the work of people at the very top of their craft, and she did exactly what she was designed to do, beautifully, right up until the very end. What failed her was never a flaw that an engineer drew into her. The failure was the hydrogen itself, and the hydrogen was only there because of a law written on another continent years earlier for reasons that had nothing to do with her. And here is the part that stays with you. The Hindenburg wasn't even the deadliest airship. The American helium ship Akron had killed 73 men when it went down at sea. The British R-101 had killed 48 in the dark. Those disasters faded from memory. The Hindenburg never did, for one simple reason. She burned in front of the cameras. The world didn't turn away from airships that day because the engineering had failed. It turned away because, for the first time, it had watched it happen. The age of the airship ended on film in about half a minute over a quiet field in New Jersey. She was a magnificent machine, asked to carry a danger she was never designed to hold, and she carried it gracefully for as long as she possibly could.